Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Or of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. There's loads to talk about. Lots of exciting and interesting boxing news stories. But before we get into the nitty gritty of all that, I want to start off with some additional comments about Devin Haney's fantastic display against George Kambosos. And I want to address a couple of messages I've had from people who I think are subscribers. There's certainly people that I've seen comment on the YouTube channel in the past. I've had a couple of people tell me that I'm hating on Devin Haney. And why do they say this? They say this because I said that Devin Haney put in a masterclass. He was superb. Additionally to that, George Kambosos was poor. And that seems to have wound people up. People don't like the fact that I'm saying that George Kambosos put in a poor performance, that there were certain things he should have done better, and that there are adjustments he could make that could make him much more competitive. Whereas some people have taken offense to that and they feel that there's nothing Kambosos could do. He's not anywhere near this level. You're not necessarily wrong. Maybe I'm the one that's wrong. But here's the thing that you have to understand. When you're saying that I'm hating on Devin Haney for saying that, it's actually your logic that's hating on Devin Haney. Because here's the thing. If George Kambosos is just an average guy, just a, and he's not a world-class lightweight, say, because I believe he's a world-class lightweight. I think he's a top 6 guy. If you don't agree and you think he's on the peripheries of top 10 or not even in the top 10, a top 15 guy, he's nowhere near Devin Haney's class. If that's the case, why do you rate Devin Haney so highly? Because that would mean that the other top lightweights all have better signature wins. Teofimo Lopez would have a much better resume than Devin Haney. It's not even close. He's beaten the likes of Lomachenko, the likes of Nakatani, the likes of Richard Comey. Loma has also beaten Comey. Loma has a fantastic resume. There's no point in even getting into that one. We know who's got a better resume between those two. Ryan Garcia's beaten Luke Campbell. Luke Campbell's no bum. So if George Kambosos is no great shakes and he's average, well then Ryan Garcia's got a better win than Devin Haney too. That brings us on to Tank Davis. He too has beaten Pedraza, who's a quality fighter, who just lost a very close fight against Ramirez, who was the former unified champion at 140. And that fight was very close. That could have gone either way, right? Pedraza might have won that. Well, he got blown out by Tank. So if George Kambosos is a nobody, it's you guys that are undermining Devin Haney. It's not me. But nonetheless, people may feel as though I'm wrong about George Kambosos because I'm assuming he's capable of making certain adjustments that he should have been able to make biomechanically that he did not do on the night. That doesn't necessarily mean he wins the fight. But what I am saying is had he made those adjustments, the fight would have been a lot more competitive. And I'm going to give you the analogy of Vladimir Klitschko and Alexander Povetkin. Had Povetkin been able to stop Vladimir from holding him and clinching him and climbing on him in the way that he did, that fight could look completely different. Because I'll tell you one thing, guaranteed, if Vladimir Klitschko has to fight Povetkin in an inside fight, Vladimir's getting sparked. The question is, could Povetkin make adjustments to force him into having to fight on the inside? Do you understand? In other words, what made that a very one-sided fight and a beatdown, much more one-sided than Devin Haney and Kambosos, by the way, was an element, was a dynamic that was key, and that was the inability of Povetkin to fight up close. Because at range, it was a mismatch. Just like this fight, at range, Devin Haney's the boss. Kambosos had to find a way to exchange in a mid-range. We spoke about these things in the preview, and I even said in the preview, he's got to be able to bypass that. He's got to be able to solve that puzzle. If he doesn't, forget it, he's going to lose. And he couldn't. So it's not like I'm revising too much right now. Yes, I thought it would be a more competitive fight. I edged Devin Haney to win the fight, but I thought that Kambosos I thought it was a pick-em. I thought it was a toss-up as to how it would turn out. Because Kambosos was unable to solve that problem, it became very one-sided. But let me show you what I'm talking about as to how Haney used the sort of move that Jack Catterall used early against Josh Taylor. And by the way, I also criticised Josh Taylor on that night against Catterall for his shot selection and his inability to stop Catterall doing this. So when I was doing that, was I hating on Catterall? Was I undermining Jack Catterall? Or was I saying, yes, Catterall deserved to win, he was excellent, but Josh Taylor should also have done a lot better because he was poor with some of the things that he didn't do? That's not hating. And in the same way, it's not hating on Devin Haney. So let's talk about it. First, I'm going to show you a couple of clips, and I'm going to show you them to you in full speed. Then I'm going to slow them down and show you that what I say, I can back up with footage. It's not just empty comments. So here they are coming together. They exchange. You saw Haney land the jab. They come together again. George Kambosos can't work on the inside. Why? What's going on here? How is Devin Haney able to tie him up constantly? Something that we spoke about in the review. You can see them here at range. And we're going to talk about what Kambosos should have done and why I believe this is an adjustment Kambosos is capable of making. So you see Devin Haney here initiates the attack with a jab. He lands the jab flush. Now, he's not waiting to react. He's not gonna wait and see what Kambosos is doing. It's instinctive. He's going to duck down. We spoke about this in the preview as well. He likes to do this, partly because maybe his feet are very far wide apart when he pushes through. When he throws a power jab, he likes to step into it, and sometimes his mobility can be affected and he wants to duck down. So as he ducks down instantly, Kambosos tries to throw a counter jab, but it goes over the head of Devin Haney. Now from this position here, Devin Haney squatted with a wide stance, his left arm still out. There is a significant gap between Devin Haney's head and the inside of George Kambosos' body. The uppercut is there for Kambosos. I showed you in the review, this is one of Kambosos' best shots. I did a prospect watch video on Kambosos when he was still a domestic prospect in Australia. Nobody knew him outside of Australia. And I was saying this guy can get to the top, but he's got to make certain adjustments. He's got the talent, but one of the adjustments he's got to make is to start throwing the right hand straighter and stop constantly throwing the uppercut, because he was overusing it. And by overusing it, what happens is your opponent starts to know it's coming and can adjust to it. You want to hide it. You want to disguise it. So you want to use it more sporadically. So one of the people that was coming at me was saying how all he's got is a left hook and a wide right hand and things like that. And I was saying, no, if you watch George Kambosos throughout his career, his best punch is his uppercut. You can't tell me he doesn't have an uppercut in his repertoire. Go and watch him, right? The uppercut is there for Kambosos here. And I explained he would have to throw that sort of shot when Haney changes his levels. This was said in the preview. Instead, Kambosos goes for a hook. Did you notice here how Haney, after he came down, he thrusted forward from that back leg to come into the body of Kambosos? That takes away the space for that right hook. So he smothers him, and then from there he lifts up. Catterall did this to Taylor. Now Kambosos has no space. Now we look again at the second exchange, the second clip that I showed you. Jab from Haney. Here, Haney actually gets caught with a left hook. But Kambosos was a little bit too keen to jump in, so he ends up smothering his own work. See how he's coming too close, Kambosos? You can see how Haney's head got snapped back there, but it sort of hit the inner forearm of Kambosos. I don't have a problem with that, because although that's not officially a scoring shot, you keep clattering a guy like that, you're going to make him tentative about him trying to duck. So that bit is fine. I don't have a problem if he's able to line him up. But notice how it wasn't really a traditional left hook. It's like a shovel hook. It came up. It was almost like an uppercut. So Haney ducked onto it. That's what I'm talking about. That shot should have been happening a lot more consistently. But then the right hand, again, comes over the top. Fair enough. Haney's able to come underneath it. I don't think he should have done that. I think you should have used head control at that point and stopped Haney from escaping. Take half a step back and work off of that, but fair enough. Haney then turns out, they both pivot out, they reset. From a scorecard perspective, it was Haney that landed the jab, but from who hurt who more, Kambosos landed a more clattering shot. You're going to put Haney off from wanting to duck like that if he keeps getting caught with those sorts of shots. So then they re-engage here. And what happens here? Haney, again, Kambosos comes in low, ready? He's going to launch himself in now because Haney's moving back. He falls short. Haney comes really low again. You see that? This time it's a right hook. Again, Kambosos should be looking at uppercut type shots. If he's throwing an uppercut here towards the solar plexus rather than a big wide hook to the head, if Haney does not duck and he decides to stay in this position, or he stands upright, or he decides to jump back, that uppercut stroke shovel hook is going to land in the solar plexus. If Devin Haney does duck, he's going to duck onto that uppercut. So the uppercut was a key shot for Kambosos. Instead, he goes for the hook and Haney's able to come underneath it. Imagine that was an uppercut now instead of a hook. He's landing towards the chin of Devin Haney. And he comes over him and there's a thrust up from that back leg with Haney and he's able to tie him up. If Kambosos can make that sort of adjustment where these things are not happening consistently and he's able to stop him from being able to duck and hold, you could see the dynamic change, because now Haney has to stay more upright. He's not going to be able to hold as much. And although you'd still fancy him at range, if Kambosos is able to force him into a position where they are constantly exchanging rather than him being held, well, now you've got a much more interesting fight. Because even though Haney's going to build up a lead, we know Kambosos does have some blistering combinations. Here he wasn't allowed to get them off. But if he's getting them off, and we've seen Devin Haney hurt in the past, well, now it becomes a much more interesting fight. It doesn't mean Kambosos wins. He might still not win, but it becomes more interesting. So you guys, I get it. You think like fans. A fan looks at this as a product and he thinks, listen, the first product, underwhelmed me. Why would I want to see a rematch? I'm not thinking like that though. I'm thinking along the lines of a trainer or along the lines of a fighter that would have to fight Devin Haney if I had the attributes of George Kambosos. If Kambosos was to ring you tomorrow and say, listen, I really want to sign you up, help me beat Devin Haney, can we come up with a game plan? What are you going to say? Nah, man, I don't want the job. Sorry, he's too good, he's too slick. Forget it. There's no way you can win. Is that what you're going to say? Or are you going to start and see this as a process and say, right, there was a process that led to the demise of Kambosos. How do we interrupt that process? And is Kambosos capable of doing certain things that could interrupt that process? This got nothing to do with hating on Haney. Haney was superb, but that doesn't mean that Kambosos was at his best. And if he was at his best and you think that he's just an average dude and he's not that good at all, well, then ultimately what you're saying is that the signature win on Devin Haney's resume is against a guy who's a bit of a bum. He's just an average guy. He's a nobody. In which case, you're the one that's undermining Devin Haney. Let's move on from that now and let's talk about resumes, since we're on the topic of resumes. In the past, I've also said how American fighters are treated differently from British fighters when it comes to the treatment they get with regards to their resume. Now, many people here will know that I am very big on Jaron Boots Ennis. I think the man is incredible. He's a wonderful athlete. He's a big puncher. He's got a lot of agility with his movement. When he's in that defensive mindset, some of his defensive moves are fantastic. When he's in an offensive mindset, he's destructive. He can box as well as be destructive. He's a future star of the sport. However, this is an attempt to show you that there is an inconsistency in the way fighters are projected in the United States compared to non-American fighters. When you look at Boots Ennis, since say 2018, he has been pretty much blasting everybody out that's been put in front of him, and he's looked superb. Conor Benn, since 2018, has been doing pretty much the same thing. Now, Conor Benn, early in his career, there is that pay no fight that is in many people's minds. He had a difficult time, but you're talking about him being 20 years old, right? He was a kid at the time. You don't judge Bernard Hopkins for losing his first ever fight, or Manny Pacquiao for losing his 7th fight, or whatever it was, because you understand that those guys did not exist anymore when you were judging them later in their careers. They grew as fighters. Well, Conor Benn, who didn't have this extensive amateur pedigree, has grown massively under Sims. If we're going to look at the last 4 years, he too has been blasting everyone away. And when you look at the level of opposition that they fought, there isn't that much of a difference, is there? I mean, actually look at some of the names that Boots has destroyed and look at some of the names that Conor Benn has destroyed. They're pretty much alike. Now, I don't have a problem if you feel Boots is a lot better than Benn based on the eyeball test. That's okay. That's what we do here on this channel. That's about analysis, right? And opinion. I get that. But isn't it unusual that Boots, who hasn't fought top caliber opposition, is pronounced by the boxing world as being the truth? But Conor Benn is protected. Conor Benn has to fight Avanesian. Conor Benn has to fight Marku, has to fight whoever else. Why don't people have that same energy when it comes to Boots Ennis? Why aren't people saying Boots Ennis has to fight Mean Machine? Why not? What's wrong with that? Or Avanesian? Let him fight a couple of top 10 guys. A lot of people keep saying Conor Benn needs to fight someone serious next time out. Otherwise, I'm off the Benn train. I've had enough of Matchroom hoodwinking us and so on and so forth. If Conor Benn was to fight anybody of your choosing that Boots has already fought, would you be happy? You wouldn't, would you? Why not? Because you don't think that Boots has fought anyone great either. So that's my point here. The difference in the treatment of fighters. We see it with a lot of American fighters, whether it's Tank Davis. If you're a guy that thinks Kambosos is bang average, then we see it with Devin Haney too, right? Who's Devin Haney fought? When are these guys going to start fighting the other top lightweights? Tank, when is Tank going to fight a top lightweight? So what I want to see is more prospects in the United States being forced to fight each other. We'll get to that in a moment, actually. But first and foremost, let's also talk about Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua, and Tyson Fury. Alexander Usyk gave an interview, quite interesting to me. He was talking to the Sun Sport in the UK. He was asked about Fury and AJ, and he actually said Fury has the right mentality and boxing skills required to beat Joshua. But it is boxing, so I can't predict what would happen and how such a fight would end. But we will have to wait and see. And I would be sure to watch. I find this to be a very unusual comment. And you know me, I like a little bit of a psychological deep dive. And I've tried to figure out what it is that he's trying to say and do here. Why would he be sure to watch? Surely if you're the one that's going to beat Anthony Joshua, you're the one that's going to be demanding you fight Tyson Fury. Do you think You're going to lose to AJ? Is there a lack of confidence there? Maybe it's just mind games, you know, because a lot of people have been saying that Tyson Fury won't want to fight Alexander Usyk if he beats Anthony Joshua. He's only going to say that he's not retiring if AJ wins. He's somehow scared of Usyk. This is the narrative that's now emerging. Maybe Usyk believes that narrative and he's thinking, listen, let me give Fury a bit of confidence here. Let me just let him think that he could also beat Anthony Joshua, so it's not like I achieved anything that he couldn't achieve, so let me try and bait him out here. Maybe that's what he's trying to do. I don't know. Let me know what you think. I just find it a very unusual comment where I'm finding it difficult to understand the reasoning or the motives. Now, moving on from that, at DJ Box 101, shout out to Dan, he put out a photo to show that Tyson Fury has met up with Ben Shalom. He's not the only one that was there, of course. His brother Tommy was there and Shane, and he also had Sugar Hill there, his trainer. Now, initially, people might have thought that this was something to do with Ben Whittaker. Tyson Fury, of course, introduced Ben Whittaker to Sugar Hill, who has signed with Boxer. However, he's not present. So maybe there's something else here. There was talk about his American deals coming to an end, Tyson Fury's. I'm not too sure how long he's got in terms of a network deal with Frank Warren. Is it possible that he's looking for new pastures green? Is he considering his future? If he's not really retired, is it possible that he's talking to Boxer about a potential fight with the winner of AJ and Usyk on Sky Sports? Who knows? Or maybe they're there for Tommy Fury. Maybe something to do with Jake Paul. Are they trying to iron out something there? Let me know what you think about this. Now, moving forward, let's talk about Oscar De La Hoya. I'm talking about matchmaking. He's come out and he said he's ready to make Gervonta Davis and I quote, multi-million-dollar offer to fight Ryan Garcia in November. I'm willing to make this fight available on DAZN and Showtime pay-per-view. Split it right down the middle and let's make this fight happen. That's a terrific offer. I like that. He's trying to go beyond the idea of let's stop DAZN working with Showtime and things like that. No. Let's just get it all done. Now, let's split it down the middle. That's essentially saying a 50-50. Now, if either guy was going to get more money, I would assume it would be Tank Davis, right? Maybe a 60-40 in his favor might be fairer. But if it's 50-50, I'm not going to be one of those people that will start to find an excuse for Tank not taking the fight. There has been all this talk about Tank considering leaving Floyd because he wants to get those big fights. Well, here's your moment. Take one of the big lightweights. If you're able to beat him, and it's by no means a foregone conclusion, despite the narrative around Ryan Garcia, he's a quality fighter, even though he might be a pretty boy that plays up to the TikTok crowd. This is a real fight. This is something I'd be very excited about. Now, moving on from Tank Davis and Ryan Garcia, let's talk about Derek Chisora. It has been announced that he will be fighting Kubrat Pulev in a rematch. A lot of people are looking at this and going, these are two washed up has-beens, and what's the point? They're journeymen at this point. Kubrat Pulev's not yet a journeyman, don't get it twisted. And Derek Chisora has always been competing at the highest level. And you know, when guys decline together anyway, you get a crossroads type of fight. You know, if one of them was still at the top of his game and the other one has declined, it's not going to make for the best fight. Kind of like when Bernard Hopkins fought Roy Jones Jr. Bernard was still operating at a very high level. Roy Jones was pretty much washed. It kills the fight. Whereas because neither of these two guys are at the peak of their powers anymore, it makes it interesting. And the first fight wasn't a great fight. Pulev was able to dictate and dominate and take control. But here's the thing. We've spoken about adjustments before. Chisora would have learned from that. He will make certain adjustments. And if he can force Kubrat Pulev into fighting a fight, we know he's a fantastic boxer. But when people have been able to stop him boxing and forcing him to fight, he doesn't like it. Kubrat Pulev is the prototypical bully. A very big guy, a fantastic technical fighter who likes to hurt people. He puts pain on them and he's laughing throughout. He's enjoying it. A Max Baer type character for those boxing historians out there. But when it gets put on him, he doesn't enjoy it. So if Chisora is able to bypass the technical elements via some adjustments, it could make for a really interesting fight. Sign me up. And one last quick one. Ben Davison was asked, what are the plans for the Tartan Tornado, Josh Taylor? And he replied on Instagram to say he wants the Cattrill fight. That's interesting to me. Is that down to public pressure? And Josh Taylor feels like he's got his back to the wall. Is it just something that he wants to do? He wants to put the wrongs right. Let me know what you think about that, but this would be a terrific fight. Please don't forget to hit that like button with a jab, a right crossing that notifications button, and an uppercut on that subscribe button. Chat to you soon. Take care, and God bless.